Hello, everybody. Good morning. Today we have Dr. María Claudia Garrido, the owner of Be Safe, a consulting company for bee health in agriculture and veterinary medicine. She will talk about the importance of biodiversity for bee health. It's yours, Dr. Claudia.
Thank you very much, Banan, also for inviting me to this event. I hope that everybody can hear me well, and as I saw your recording, so I hope that everything will go well. So let me share my screen. Okay. Oh, okay. You have to give me the permission to share the screen, please. The button where you can share the screen there, you can just say only you or also participants. Unless I'm logged in as a participant, you have to give me the permission to share the screen, please.
Does it work?
Okay, yes, now it works. Thank you. Okay, here we are. Okay, as we said, I'll be talking a little bit about the importance of biodiversity for bee health. Perhaps a few words about me. I'm a biologist and I own Be Safe now for 10 years. So I started my independence 10 years ago. Before that, I worked with several institutes and institutions, always now in a total of next year, 30 years. So yeah, I have quite a bit of experience on my belt. And I'm putting this together now, also referring to biodiversity and consulting in agriculture, and as I said, also veterinary medicine. Okay, so first of all, perhaps we have to define what biodiversity even is, because it's talked about in different ways, and the easiest definition may be that biodiversity means the variety of living beings, so all the different species, all the living beings, animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, everything that we have in its different forms and respective ecosystems. So the biodiversity in Jordan is different than the biodiversity we have here, no? But because of the climatic conditions and the plants and everything that exists, so also the soils, etc., all these conditions make that we have different biodiversity patterns in different regions of the world. But this is the easiest definition maybe of biodiversity. And honeybees, of course, are an important part of this. But maybe this is also already the first misunderstanding. Honeybees alone don't make biodiversity. No? So they are important pollinators, but they have to work also with all the other pollinators out there to maintain biodiversity, and they need biodiversity. So food plants, etc., to maintain biodiversity. Perhaps you can close your mic. I don't know who's talking. Please close your mic so that, or if there's a question.
I close it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first important thing about biodiversity, if we talk about bee health, It's the bee nutrition. So like for us, healthy nutrition keeps bees healthy. And as you know, honeybees and all other bee species get all their nutrients from nectar and pollen mainly, and also from honeydew and a few minerals from water. But the most important are nectar and pollen. And what is also important to note is that nectar is mainly a sugar source. So the energy bees need to fly or the larvae need to grow, etc. So nectar is mainly sugar and an energy source. And most of the nutrients, and the great majority of the nutrients, comes from the pollen. And this is something I've noticed that beekeepers very often forget or don't consider. That for them, obviously, it's important that the bees have plenty of nectar sources so that they can produce good honey. But the pollen is very important for the bees because it's all the nutrients they need. They get them mainly from the pollen. So all the proteins and minerals and vitamins come from the pollen and not from the nectar, mainly. One thing that we have to consider when we look at a honeybee colony is that we have 3 different levels of nutrition, or 3 different levels we have to look at when we think about bee health also. So first of all, of course, the adult bees. These are those you see, no, you work with, you observe when you work on the colonies. But we also have the level of the whole colony. And we have the level, very important, of the brood. So the larvae have to be fed healthily so that they can grow up healthy also. These 3 levels aren't separated from each other, but they interact, no? So they have to, for instance, if the larvae aren't fed well, then the adult bees that hatch from these larvae after the 21 days won't be healthy and won't live as long, etc. If the stores, so the honey and the pollen stores in the colony aren't sufficient, then the adult bees don't get also the nutrients they need to feed the brood or also to fly out and forage. No, so these 3 levels are connected with each other. This is very important, but the different levels have also different needs depending on the level. So the whole colony needs the stores, honey and the pollen and the bee bread. The brood needs pollen, mainly also some honey for energy and growing, and the adult bees need pollen or proteins for being able to feed the brood, or later on in their life to energy to forage and then bring back again more nutrients to the colonies. So you see it's all connected with each other. Something that may be a good analogy also to think of when we think about pollen is that pollen is something like a bee steak. So if you have a nice piece of meat, then this is a lot of proteins for you. But these nutrients or vitamins, minerals, proteins, fats you get in from a piece of meat then are transformed in women, for instance, obviously, when they feed their babies with milk. No, so it's not the meat itself that the baby eats, but it's the proteins from the meat or other protein sources the mother ate transforms into milk. And it's the same, more or less, or it's an analogy for the bees. The pollen is something like the steak or the piece of meat for the bees. They transform it for the larvae into the larval food, which you can see here around the larvae. All this, what is kind of brilliant, is larval food. which they feed to the larvae so that they can grow well. So good pollen sources are good for the larvae in the end, and so that they grow up healthy and are good workers afterwards as adult bees. This is very important when we look at the organs of the adult bees. No, obviously during the larval stage and later on the pupal stage, the body of the bees transforms into adult bees, and when they didn't get enough pollen as larvae, then they don't develop their organs well during their development. But also the adult bees, you know that the very young bees feed the brood, and they do this, they produce the larval food with a hypopharyngeal gland. And here you can see a hypopharyngeal gland here at the left. I hope you see my mouse, so when I'm showing something, you can, here at the left, you can see a hypopharyngeal gland of a worker bee that has fed on good pollen sources. So you see it's very well developed, this organ. And on the right side, you see a hypopharyngeal gland from a worker that didn't get enough pollen. So you see it looks completely different, and this isn't an organ that can produce food, larval food to feed the brood well. It's the same also for the fat body. Here on the left side, the left photo, it's the same here. On the left side of the left photo, we have a worker bee that didn't get enough pollen before the winter, no? And you see that there's nothing in there in this. So it's opening the abdomen, dissecting the bee. And on the right side of this photo, you can see that the abdomen is completely filled with the fat body. And this is very important for the bees in this time, for instance, when it's getting cooler. I know that you have other conditions. So I have a heating these days. My heating broke down yesterday. So if you hear a ventilator, it's because I have a warm ventilator to keep me warm. No, and I during this time, the bees are in a winter cluster. Perhaps you have brood all winter long, but here we have a winter cluster, and that's the time when the bees need a good immune system also. And that immune system is in the fat body of the bees. And it's also a storage organ, so all the nutrients they will need in the next spring to feed the brood again and to begin the life cycle again are stored in the fat body too. So in autumn, or for you perhaps before the break in the summer, when there aren't resources, there aren't flowers in the summer anymore because it's too hot and too dry. Before that time, the bees need a lot of pollen sources to form this fat body to come over this time that they don't have resources. So that's a very important organ for the bees. Also to resist diseases, because there's also where the immune system works of the bees. So the colleagues from Switzerland said this phrase, which I find very important: a proper availability of pollen is crucial for the development of some internal organs of the worker bees. So without enough good pollen sources, they don't form these organs, and therefore they can't function well in the colony, and so the health of the whole colony is affected. So you may ask yourself, how does this relate to biodiversity? And I told you all this because it's biodiversity. So the diversity of plants is very important for honeybee colonies. So it's not enough that they get only one pollen source, but they need a lot of different pollen sources. This was demonstrated very well from French researchers a few years ago, who did a study about 5 years and they brought the colonies into oilseed rape fields, so like this, no, so Brassica napa, no, so oilseed rape fields or sunflower fields, and then analyzed where the nectar came from, the bees brought back, and where the pollen came from, the bees brought back. Okay, and what they found was very impressive in my eyes, because they found that for the nectar, so for the energy source, it was enough that there was one big source like the oilseed rape or sunflowers or other blooming agricultural crops they may collect on. But for the pollen, they came back with a lot of different pollen sources, also from weeds bloom around. So if you let them choose, they get the nectar from only one plant, so the plant that gives them most of it. But for the pollen, they're really interested in getting as much diverse pollen as possible. And you can see this in this graphs here in the right up corner, without going too much into detail, but you can see that they are, every pattern is a different plant. They are bringing back a lot of different pollen from different plant species, and that's what they like. So they like to mix up the pollen instead of getting pollen only from one source. This is important also for biodiversity programs in agriculture. Have a misspelling there, I'm sorry for that. Here, just as an example, we have a program here from Germany. So these are wheat fields, and at the borders, the farmers sowed in also different plants, different flowers. And as you can see, these aren't flowers that are interesting for your bees to make honey of, so it's not interesting for you perhaps, but it's very interesting for the bees, because they collect pollen from all these different flowers. So these flowering strips that have to look differently here in Germany or in your country, obviously. You will have other flowers, though here the poppies are something I remember very well, because I lived for half a year in Algeria when I was very little, when I was only 3 years old. And the only thing I remember was a wheat field in front of our window of the house, and it was full of poppies in also. So I would think about Algeria when I see poppies. But anyway, this isn't interesting for you as a beekeeper, because these aren't nectar plants, so not plants you can make honey of. But it's very important for the bees that they get all these different kinds of pollen, so that they can have the diversity to feed on. And these flowering strips at the fields also connect different habitats between each other. So if you have only wheat fields, for instance, that's very good for us because we get the flower from it. But for the bees, it's a kind of a desert, because they don't have anything to feed on. So if there are flowers in between, flowering strips in between, this connects the different habitats, the different places where the bees can collect everything they need. So the diversity of different pollen sources is very important. I always say that, I think I have it in the next slide, yeah. I always say that diversity is very important for the bees as it is for us, because obviously healthy eating maintains bee health. And an example, for instance, you can eat a lot of tomatoes. Tomatoes are very healthy, but if you eat only tomatoes, you don't get all the nutrients you need. And it's the same for the bees when we talk about the pollen. So there are, of course, different plant species that are very important, very healthy for them. But if they have only one, then they don't get all the nutrients they need. They need the diversity, and this may look like this also. This is another flowering strip here in Germany. again, poppy and different other flower species. The bees don't make honey from this, but they collect all the pollen from this, and that helps them to maintain their health. There are plenty of studies about this. For instance, some have shown that good and diverse pollen sources, so as many different flowers as possible, help the bees to protect themselves against diseases like viruses and also nosema, which I've seen in the MediBees project, that also in Jordan, nosema is one of the major threats or major problems in bee health. So a lot of different pollen sources help the bees to protect themselves against that. Obviously, it protects themselves also against malnutrition. So as I said before, it's not enough to eat only pollen of one plant, because that doesn't give them all the nutrients they need. And it helps them also to avoid the negative effects from intoxications, for instance, from pesticides, which doesn't mean that when you offer a lot of different flowers, then the farmers can spray what they want. But it helps them so that the effects aren't as bad. And also diverse pollen sources have been shown to help bees in overwintering or overcoming times with only very little resources. In your case, it may be more the very hot and dry summer where the bees don't have resources. Now I think you have more resources for them than during the summer. It also helps in the colony development. As I said, the larvae, the brood has to be fed. So that's important for the beekeepers also. If you do queen rearing, it will be better and you will have better results if you have enough different pollen sources around. When we now come to the diseases, sorry, I have to drink a little bit of water. Be something that we think first of when we think of health. We think that we don't have any diseases present. So health, as you may have noticed, is much more than only the absence of diseases. That's why I talked so much about nutrition, for instance. So nutrition also gets into this definition of health. But obviously, we also have diseases. I have an example for you. The left side. Okay, there it is again. So I repeat that sentence. On the left side, you have the survival of adult bees that which were completely healthy, so without nosema, and every one of these curves is one pollen source, and these black dotted line is their survival without pollen. So when they are fed only sugar water without any pollen, you can see that this is the curve that goes down very quickly, even if no nosema is present. Okay, and then you can see that the other plants, the other pollen sources, offer different survival curves. So citrus we have here, this may be a plant that you have too. This is a study in Italy, so the flora may be quite similar in some cases. It's not that good also, so this pollen is okay, but it's better than no pollen, but it doesn't have everything they need. And you can see here the other plants are a little bit better, and the mix is here in between. Also, the thread curve is a mix of different pollens, and that was as good as rubus, for instance, which are blackberries, for instance, pollen. So, but as we don't know what plants are present in an area, and you can't really assess. It's better that there is a mix so that they have the best survival rates. You can see up to 50 days. Almost half of the bees still were alive in a lab situation, so not the best situation also. When we look at the situation with Nosema, so in addition a disease, you can see that the survival is much shorter for all bees. So most, when you see here the 50% survival were dead after 30 days. But again, you can see here this black dotted line means no pollen, so that's when the bees died most quickly. Again, cystis wasn't as good. And what is interesting here, that all these different pollen sources that without Nosema are more or less the same, separate with when we have a disease in between. So you can see here also this brown, which is chestnut, which isn't as good. Also the bees die quicker, etc. And the best in presence of a disease was a mix of different pollens. You can see this red curve. The survival rate is the highest or the longest for the bees. Okay, so this is a lab situation. Obviously, it's different in your colonies in the field. It's only single bees, but it's an indication that a mix of different pollen will help your bees to survive longer and also function longer. And as we can see, a mix of different pollen helps them best, even if there's Nosema present or other diseases also. So another thing that we have in when we talk about biodiversity is that unfortunately honeybee diseases aren't specific for honeybees. We have described about 30 honeybee diseases that we find also in other insect species. On this side of the graph, on the right side of the graph, you can see a list of different diseases that we thought are specific for honeybees. And here on this side, on the left side, you can see different insect species or different insect groups where we have found these honeybee diseases in. So don't go into detail because this is a very complex graph and it will take me longer than only a few minutes. But just to give you an impression on how interconnected honeybees are also with other insect species. And we don't know very much about the risks from these honeybee diseases for other insect species, which are also pollinators. As I said at the beginning, honeybees alone don't maintain biodiversity. We need all the pollinator community, which doesn't make your honeybees less important. Okay, so considering that others are also important doesn't make your importance less. Okay, so it's still important to have honeybees. But to show you an example about this, here in this large photo, you can see it's another bee species. This isn't a honeybee. This is a Coletus, which in English you call them ivy bees, I think. I'm not sure about the English name, but you can see that this bee also has a crippled wing, which is something you see when you have a lot of varroa in your colonies. You see the workers with crippled wings. The problem with varroa, of the problems that you have in the survival of your colonies because of it, is that it also transmits virus infections like the deformed wing virus, which makes symptoms like this, crippled wings. And it is kind of a catalyst. So with varroa, we have much more virus in the system than without varroa. And this leads that an infected honeybee like this one, when it visits a flower, it leaves the virus on there, and other bees like these bumblebees then take it up and can transmit it into their nests also. And then we have symptoms like this, that also wild bee species, wild pollinators have crippled wings and have clinical symptoms of this honeybee disease. And as I said, as Varroa is the catalyst of the infection, it's very important that you do a proper Varroa treatment, because with that you keep the Varroa, not only the Varroa down, but also the viruses down, and the risk that something like this happens is lower. So with the to say it in one sentence, with a Varroa treatment, a proper Varroa treatment, you help to maintain biodiversity, not only your bees, but you have also an active part of it, okay? When we take it the other way around, biodiversity, so large diversity of other insects also protects your colonies against these virus infections, because not every insect species is as susceptible as honeybees to these diseases. So they don't get it as easily as honeybees do. So this is a study from 2 years ago, which is very interesting, because it was the first time to show that the higher the species richness is, so the more different insect species you have in an area, the lower the prevalence, so the frequency virus infections occur in honeybee colonies occur, okay? So if you have high insect diversity, so a lot of different insect species around you and a lot of different plant species around you, this protects also your colonies, because not every of these insect species gets or transmits this virus infections as easily as honeybees do, okay? So preserving diversity also at this level helps also the health of your colonies. So to wrap it up, to make a short summary, I hope that I was able to show you that biodiversity, talking about all living beings in an ecosystem, is important also for the health of your colonies, because honeybees get all their nutrients from nectar and pollen, and there, as more different pollen sources we have, the healthier the colonies are. This also because they are generalists, so they want to have a lot of different sources, and if they have different sources, they will use all of them. Pollen diversity helps to resist diseases and other stressors like intoxications, as I said. And this is also important because when we have higher diversity, the transmission from honeybee diseases to other insects is lower. And on the other side, or looking from it from the other side, also the more diversity we have, the lower is the probability that honeybee colonies get these diseases. So Varroa treatments and good practices in general protect your colonies, but also other pollinators. Okay, and with that, thank you much for your attention. And if you have any questions, you can tell me. Coming back to you. Okay. I don't see any questions in the chat, at least nothing I could understand.
Thank you, Dr. Claudia, for your comprehensive lecture that shows the reverse impact of the importance of biodiversity. We know the importance of bees on biodiversity, and now we know the impact of biodiversity on the bees and the bee health. Yeah. Thank you very much. Any questions from the audience? Dr. Khalid, تفضل, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the nice presentation that I really enjoyed. I would like to ask regarding the diversification of the foraging plants. Would it matter if the diversification was through diversified wild species or cultivated species? And what is the effect of having different proportions between wild species and cultivated species as a foraging plants for your honeybees?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, this is a good question because we don't really know in that detail. The findings show that flowering strips, for instance, help honeybees to diversify their diet when they are well designed. So the important thing is that that native plants are used. No, so plants that resist also the conditions you may have. You can't use the seeds we use here in Germany that won't do well in your conditions, obviously. So we know about that, but we don't know about the proportion of area, no, how large these flowering strips have to be. This also depends on the different conditions. Obviously, the more the better. No, so because you give them the bees more diversity to choose from, so what they like best. We also know that bees choose certain plants to get secondary plant chemicals to medicate themselves. No? So when they have some gut parasites, for instance, they collect more nectar on different plants which have compounds that help them to against this parasite. So the more diversity you have, the more options you give the bees. The minimum area we have seen here that works very well is about a meter and a half on the edge of a field, with as much different diversity of native plants possible. That may look a little bit different in your conditions. And also it depends on the area, obviously, that you have. No, in some areas, maybe agriculture, maybe fields to field to field to field. So you have to convince farmers to get a little bit of that for the flowering strips and perhaps pay compensations or things like that. So that's something that has been done here in Germany, but it's hard work to convince farmers to do that. Now, what may convince them also is that it has also been shown that these flowering strips help also to host predators, for instance, that help to combat pests they have on their crop. So then it's a win-win, no? So because a farmer says, okay, perhaps I have a meter less of the field on each edge, but I know that there are other insects in that help me to combat the aphids, and I don't have to spray as much. No, and that helps also the beekeepers and the honeybees. No, so these are things that have to be studied in your conditions to be sure that it works the same way. But the basic principle is that, and I don't see why it shouldn't work for you. You just have to work with other plants, for instance. No. Yeah, complicated question.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just because it might be came to someone's mind that I could diversify in the cultivated crops. So diversification by cultivated plants versus having more wild flora in the surroundings and more ecological corridors and things like that. This is what I meant.
Okay, I misunderstood. Yeah, so obviously diversified crops also help, but the ecological corridors are better when we talk about bee health, because it offers this diversity of different plants that helps them to feed on. So even if you have a lot of different flowering crops one after the other, this is in a certain time period, it's a mass flowering of only one plant. No, so for bee health, they need this diversity also at this time. So if today I eat only tomatoes, I didn't get all the nutrients I need, even if tomorrow I eat only broccoli, to give you a very silly example. It's the same for bees. So the diversification of agricultural crops obviously is good also for soil health and different things. But the bees, for their health, they need diverse pollen sources at every moment. So a combination of both is the best. It's the most complicated, but it's the best.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. Dr. Muhammad Nasri, you have a question? أستاذ محمد نصري. دكتورة فضيلة, please. How are you?
السلام عليكم, شلونك بنان? Good morning for everybody. We miss you a lot, you and Dr. Khaled and everybody in Jordan. It was a very beautiful time we're spending that. Thank you for everybody there. Thank you for you and for all the people in Jordan and in your center. I have one question, which is related to the bees. Do you, for the regarding the endangered ones, do you have any plan for the endanger of the bees, and it has any relation with the crops or flower that is also in danger? You know, if the flower or the crops, which is it is food for the bees in danger. Also, I think by lost these things, the bees will not, you know, to change their food if they are adapt on this one, on the some type of food. I mean, and do you have any strategy for to study or to deal with the endangered bees? And see, it is not my field, but I cannot imagine how can I know the bees who was flying all the time and know about the endangered one. Thank you very much. For
so the strategy is always to maintain habitat. So maintain the spaces where we find the flowers these bees are specialized on. So perhaps a small explanation. From all the 20,000 species of bees we have all over the world, there's a fraction, or quite the majority of it, that don't feed on all different flower species, but feed only for pollen, only on certain flowers. So, for instance, there are bee species that are specialized on sunflowers, for instance. So, for those, a sunflower field obviously offers everything they need. But there are also bee species that are specialized on wildflowers, and if they don't grow, then also these bees can't feed. So we need a combined strategy again to maintain the habitat for these endangered plants, so that the endangered bees, or these specialized bees, can feed on these flowers and maintain biodiversity, because also these weeds or these wildflowers are part of biodiversity. This is difficult in an agricultural setting. The strategy here in Europe is mainly to offer semi-natural habitat, it's called. So, for instance, structures like hedges, or not to have field after field after field or anything managed, but have in between corridors which are wild habitats or semi-wild habitats. So, for instance, perhaps you have a little stream in between, and then the area around the stream, you don't manage it for agriculture, and then you have perhaps a flowering strip, so again something managed, and then the fields begin. So with this buffer zones, we try to maintain the habitat also for these endangered plants and bees, and it helps also honeybees, because these are areas they can fly in also and have a larger diversity of flowers also. If I explain it like this, it may seem quite easy. Also, this is very difficult to do. The best thing, obviously, is if we have already a wild habitat, to maintain that. If we have to restore it, then it gets complicated, because you have to convince the landowner, etc. And also it gets more complicated, but that's more or less the strategy. The European Union now has also changed a little bit its agricultural policy as a community to improve these measures and to again diversify also not only the crops, but also to increase this type of measures from flowering strips going into wild areas, so habitats we don't manage. It's a complicated thing, and this is now the result after 40 years of common agricultural policy. You can imagine that between different countries, the interests sometimes are very different also, and it's not an easy task, but that's more or less the strategy.
Thank you very much for your clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Yes, Dr. Khaled, please.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor again. This is a question that I keep keeps alarming in my mind, and I talked to Banan in some occasions about. Now you are talking about the importance of the foraging plant species for the health of the honeybees. Now, if we take it the other way around with some modifications, like saying the importance of biodiversity in bees or other pollinators on the conservation process, on the conservation of flora.
Yes.
And
yes.
enrichment of the soil seed bank.
Mm-hmm.
Any idea about this? Thank you.
It boils down again to the maintaining the habitat that is already there, and then trying to increase this habitat area, so to give all the biodiversity the room to live in. No, so it's always kind to trying to find a compromise between the areas we manage, no, and the area that we leave without management, so that the biodiversity can do its service for us also. We have to think about this. It's not only the health of the honeybees, but biodiversity helps us also to keep clean water, for instance, or soil health and all these things. So the strategy is always to look at the situation, and unfortunately I never visited your country, so I don't have a good idea of how this may look like in the agricultural areas you have, and to try to maintain the wild spaces. So perhaps you have, as I said, little water streams around the Jordan, which from what I know from geography is the main area where you do agriculture, no? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm afraid you might miss the point. I'm talking now about the wild flora.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the diversification in the pollinators, whether they are bees or other pollinators. Is there any research run already or is being run on the effect of diversification in pollinators on the conservation of the flora, of the enrichment of the soil seed bank, as per
okay, yeah, understood. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries.
There's a very good program, which is the IPBES. So I write it in the
Yes.
chat. Hmm?
Yeah, I know that best. Yes.
Yeah, so and they did they brought together all the different research about both pollinators and also agricultural diversity and things like that. The problem or the issue really is that most of this research has been done in Europe, and they are also in Northern and Central Europe, not as much Southern Europe, which would apply more to you, and North America. So the methods would be the same, no? But it would be very important that in your areas you do things like that also, because obviously we can develop strategy that really work only when we know the situation. As I said before, I don't see a reason why the methods don't work also in your areas, but we have to look at the different species that you have, no? I saw that the Apimondia meeting you had last week, was just about this also, food security in your areas, and biodiversity is important for that, no?
Sure.
So I would go into these IPBES reports and look at the methods and all the research they cite and try to do the same thing for your conditions, and to add that also to the discussion so that the strategies diversify also, no?
Yeah,
Because,
that's right. That's right.
And that's very
Perfect.
important.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Khaled. Dr. Fadila, again, please.
Yes, I don't have a question, but I want some, even not comments. But you know, when I attend the meeting in Amman, we went to one of the farm for honeybees, and thank you for this journey. You know, it was so beautiful. And I noticed there is a lot of a product, you know, so beans, I mean, and honey beans is very important. I bought some of the cream for the hand. Believe me, until now, I feel the most beneficial for the skin is from there. So you know, I encourage to go to have some of industrial things for the cosmetic things related to the honey from bees. And also I bought some of the other product, which is beautiful. You know, I encourage to go for safe this type of we can say this type of organism. It is beautiful, and the first time I know about their benefit when I visited that time. This is just comment on the how it's. I'm very happy to know a lot of beans, a lot of information about the benefit of the beans and its product. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Muhammad Al-Gurne, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Claudia and Banal, for this presentation. Maybe I don't have a question, but I have comments. So you mentioned in your talk a nice result about the importance of the pollen for honeybees and also other pollinators. As I see also one paper you mentioned also is nice about 2 years published about the richness of the species decrease the virus disease, which very interesting. It's very interesting. As I know also in Germany, I was in Germany, so I know many research papers that is very important for bees and also pollinators. So all of us and all of the scientists in the world knows that the importance of the habitats of biodiversity for pollinators and for being for all living organisms. So the problems which I suggest, like the problems for the humans activity, So we know we have many research published nowadays. We agree in Germany, Europe, in USA, all the researchers knows that the habitat is very important for the bees and other pollinators. Without habitats, there's no food, there's no bees, there's no life. So I think now we need to think about the decision markers or the politicians, leaders, or our like policy in this world. So we destroy from our hands, we destroy the habitats. So we have big problems nowadays. Really, we need to think about this. For example, I am from Palestine, so now you know all of you about the wars nowadays, how they destroy not only the humans, they destroy everything. So we not only the humans. Human is okay, we don't need the humans. But what about the bees? They destroy the bees, everything. Not only in the Palestine, but everywhere. So I think we need to think now. We have enough research in the world. We have many works. We have many efforts. But we need to think, on the other hand, how we can stop these problems, because most of the losses from our activity, from the humans' activity. This is what I think. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just I think in this way, we have nice research. I know you mentioned very nice articles about the pollen, but we have something missing. How we can finish these problems? We know if we continue like this, we goes in the negative way. Not only Middle East, all the world.
Yes,
so I am sorry
that's
to
true.
interrupt you, but, so I think I met you, Claudia, last year because I studied with Robert Buxton and Hannes Katz in Haile Zale, Martin Luther University. So I finished recently my PhD. I think I met you last year in the big conference in the Berlin. I don't know if you attended this.
I didn't go to Berlin this year. No,
okay,
no,
so
I didn't go there.
I met you so this is just like my comments, but
Yes.
thank you for your nice presentation, and yes, thank you.
I agree on that, and unfortunately this adds a layer of complexity. So when we have a problem, be it anything, the first step is always to know what is really the problem. And we have a lot of research about that, as you said. And as scientists, we know which is the problem, and we can give recommendations, which IPBES does very much, for instance. No, so IPBES is very good in that because it writes very concise and good papers on advice for policymakers. But then we have the other layer of complexity that is first the policymakers, which have to recognize that it's important, and then also do the things that aren't really catchy like that. No? So if I say it in a more polemic way than I mean it, but a politician is elected for 4 to 5 years. They aren't interested in seeing results in 30 years. They are interested in seeing results immediately. Very simplified, like that, no? And also when we talk about beekeepers or farmers or anyone who has to change something to make the world a little bit better, it's very difficult also to convince people to change their habits. I remember when Varroa came here, to convince beekeepers that they had to do the treatments a certain way. And now, after 50 years, we still have the same problem. Not all beekeepers have understood how they're able to change what they're doing, what they have always done like that. So this adds the layer of education. No, not only school meetings, a lot of these things, like the meeting we had last last week and things like that, also meeting and talking to beekeepers, same thing, to convince people to do the right thing. It takes time, and we don't have. I understand that this is very difficult, but we can't do it otherwise, because otherwise it won't be sustainable. If you force people to do something as soon as they don't have this force on them anymore, they don't do it. You have to make them understand, and this unfortunately is a very slow process.
Thank you.
Chat question.
It's a bit frustrating.
Yeah. Salim Akram asking about what about the bees' health in the human feeding bee farming projects.
Do you mean the pollination for human, also the effect of bees on human health?
I think he asked about that, yes.
Okay. That's also a very interesting area, because we know, for instance, that fruit that has been pollinated by insects, so be it bees or other pollinators, has higher nutrient content. For instance, vitamin A increases in fruit when it has been properly pollinated by bees and other insects, and also some other nutrients. So also our health depends on healthy nutrition, and by this we depend also on pollinators and their health. So you see, everything is connected. And quite complex because of that, unfortunately. On the other hand, we also have products like the one Dr. Fadila talked about, and also the apitherapy, so propolis, which acts against viruses and things like that. And this is also a very interesting area to develop. But as scientists, we have to look at, though, that the tests are done the proper way. So the same way as aspirin, to, let's say, something that everybody knows, was developed in a very standardized way and is produced in a very standardized way. We also have to look that the products we get from the bees and that help the health as a medicine, they always have to give the same result, or have to be tested the proper way. So that's very important. But I think there's a lot of research also testing that and making studies on that. So we have these two areas: the influence of bees on human health via the nutrition, and also via this different products.
Thank you, Dr. Claudia. On behalf of Dr. Rida Shibli, the Executive Secretary of ARENINA, he was unable to attend us because he was busy in another meeting. Thank you again for being with us. Looking forward to meeting you again. Wish you a good time, Dr. Claudia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Banan, and I hope to see you soon again also.
Yes, yes, of course, you are welcome anytime.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. مع السلامة.
And thank you for all the questions also and all the comments.
Thank you very much.
مع السلامة. يعطيكم العافية جميعا.
شكرا، مع السلامة.
Bye.